You say to yourself, what was the price of the BlackBerry last year? What is the price of the BlackBerry this year? Okay. So for us to say this is inflation, it's within that basket. It's not an increase in one price. It's an increase, yes, within that basket. It's a sustained increase. That becomes inflation. Okay. So it is measured using then, because you've got so many products. So if you look in that example, you find product A. What was the price this year? What is the price currently? This year it's 15, last year it was 10. That's a 50% increase, right? Okay. That's a 50% increase. But then looking at just that, you would say the prices have increased by 50%. But then the calculation of inflation then goes beyond that to say within this basket, what percentage of your income is spent on alcohol? You see. If it's 30%, then in calculating these price increases, they will have different weights. Okay. They will have different weights. So in that example, you've got that same product A of 50%. The consumer then spends 30% of their income on that particular product. So it is then the ratio of the income spent of 30% times the increase in price of 50%, which will contribute to the inflation rate. So do you see that you've got in brackets 0.3 by 50, right? That is product A. You do the same with product B, you do the same with product C, and then you then find on average, you then say on average, the prices of these three goods have increased by 40%. You see that? But when you look at these three goods, product C actually increased by 100%. You see that? So that's why you were saying that your inflation rate applicable to you might not be the 40%. Because if you buy more of product C, the rate applicable to you will be 100%. You see, you might find you don't have product B in your basket. You know. So you then get an inflation rate of 40%. Okay. So in the same way, and the PMA then asks you now to look at prices of okay, it's actually asking you to look at the impact of inflation within your organization, right? So, in other words, we want you to tell us what impact does inflation have in your organization. You know, we might discuss here the impact of inflation to South Africa as a whole, but then in the assignment, we want you to talk about your organization in particular. You know, what impact does it have in the running of your organization, in the decisions that you are making as an organization? You know. The first part discusses generally about inflation, right? Okay.
So, sorry, just on the question on the PMA. For some organization, just as an example, their inflation rate might be affected by even factors that are beyond South Africa.
That's true. That's true. And that's what we want to see in the assignment.
Okay.
That's what we want to see in that particular assignment. Because the first part is, yeah. we are discussing in general just inflation and how it's measured. Then the second part, we want you to apply that now to your particular organization and say, this is the impact. The impact on your organization might not be 6.4%. It might be greater. On others, it might be less. This is what we want to see. Okay. Any questions there? All right. So it's actually flowing from the first part, because the first part, what you are doing, actually question one, you're actually looking at at the cost structure of your organization, right? You're looking at the cost structure of your organization to say, this is our fixed cost, this is our variable cost, this is our sales per unit, the break even. How much do we need, so that we don't make a loss? How much do we have to make, right? Then what strategies can you then implement into that organization to say, okay, we can do 1, 2, 3 to reduce the cost, these costs, these expenses. Then if you reduce these expenses, what impact would it have on your break even? Would you now need to sell more or sell less for you to break even as an organization?
To counteract inflation. As in what I'm trying to say is that.
So that one, you are looking as an organization, as you are looking at it from a profit point of view, to say, which is about containing your expenses as a business. Okay. Because you might find for you to break even, okay, we are covering our total cost by selling 1,000 loaves, right? But we have realized that there are wastages within the system, right? If we do 1, 2, 3, we can save so much. So what is the impact on you as an organization? Oh, we'll now need to sell 500 loaves for us to cover our expenses. So we want to see now that part, how it will contribute towards meeting your total costs as an organization. We are still going to do through a theoretical example of break-even, just the calculation part. But this is the concept. This is what we want to see in the PMA.
Can you try to explain clearly for me this income spent on each item here? How they come to this result?
Which one? Page
46.
Page 46.
Yes.
Okay. So what you have, if you look on page 45, you are comparing the price of product A, B, C, and you are saying what was the price of this product last year. So if we look here, product A, the price, so you can actually write here 2012, 2018, right? And say this year it is 15 rand. Last year it was 10. It has increased by how much? By 5, right? So it has increased by 5. Now the percentage increase would be 5 over 10. 5 over 10 by 100, then it gives you 50%. Right? This year it has increased to 22. It has increased by 2. So 2 over 20 then would give you the rate, which would be so how much? 10. So it's 10, right? So that's 10%. Then for product C, that's 100%. Huh? Okay, that's 100%. So you've got 3 products: 50%, 10%, 100%. Now we look at your income and say within these 3 products. Remember, Statistics South Africa is doing this for within a basket, which is average South African basket. Then it says within these 3 goods, what percentage of your income do you spend on on these three goods. On product A, you spend 30%, on product B, 50%, on product C, 20%. So you multiply these. Then the answer that you get here becomes 40%. Now this becomes the average increase for the year, which is 40%. But if you look at the three goods, one increased by 20%, sorry, by 10%, the other one by 100%.
So in other words, these are just variables that are inputs here.
Well, this now for Statistics South Africa, it will do through its surveys, a random survey. Take just a random survey from, a random survey and find out what percentage of their income is spent on the different items in the basket. Okay. It's not possible to ask every person in South Africa, you know. So they will take a sample. I'm sure you which is part of statistics, the sampling techniques. How do you make a sample representative of South Africa? Then within that sample, that's where you get this information. Okay. So then you get 40%. Okay. You get 40%. But then inflation is now based on it's the same approach, but this is now an index where you have a year. Okay, we'll start measuring what is the change in prices with respect to a base year. So your base year could be 2000, or you could say 2005. So prices will be measured as according to that base. You know. So which means prices of that basic year will be allocated an index of 100. Okay. So using the same calculation, which is this one, if the index then rises to 120, then inflation is increased by 20%. If the index rises to 140, inflation is increased by 40%. Okay. Okay. Now, just go down there on page 46. You see now we have the index, which is 100. We have this year's price, and remember we had said there. So last year, this is now comparing this year's price to last year's price. So if we say last year's price is the base, then last year's price as an index would have 100 as an index. Okay. Is it something that we are familiar with? Okay. The simple way of getting an index is this. Take product A. Okay. 2013, 2012. It says, what's the price this year? 15. Mm-hmm. The price last year? 10. Right? So if this is our base, 2012. So it means 2012, the index in 2012 would be 100. Okay. So what is the index for this year? So you will take this year's price, 15, divide by last year's price, which is 10, and multiply by 100. Then you get 150. 15 divided by 10 times 100. This will give you 1.5 times 10. 1.5, if you multiply 1.5 by 10, by 100, sorry. This is 1, 5. To take out the comma, you cancel another 0. Cancel this 0, it comes in, it's 150. You see that? So the same goes for the next product. This year's price divided by last year's price times 100. Okay. So this is how Statistics South Africa then calculates inflation. as an index. Okay. Any questions there? Okay. We have talked about that. Now just have a look at inflation rates that have at record rates.
Sure.
Now I want you to look at this part. Says time required for prices to double. So in other words, what it says is that if this was sold for 5 rand, right? You come back after 15 hours, it will be 10 rand. You come back after another 15 hours, it will be 20. So every 15 hours, the price is going
It's
up.
like flight tickets.
That's hyperinflation. And of course, secondly, so every 24 hours, maybe that's why that guy had, you know. So which means you withdraw the money today, you withdraw 100 rand to buy bread, which is 50 rand. Tomorrow when you wake up, that bread is 100 rand. You get a problem at home, you don't make it to the store. Tomorrow that product is 200. So what happens to your 100 rand? It's useless, worthless. And of course, there's, I think the Germany story, which is one that has been told several times back about the wheelbarrow and the money. Somebody then deciding, no, I will not take that. Okay. I want to look at I want you to look at deflation. The opposite of inflation. Prices are actually falling. Is that a good thing for the country?
Prices are falling.
Prices are falling.
Yeah, it's a good thing. For poor years.
It says prices are falling. Do you think it's good?
Prices, so it will depend on the items that the prices are. If you have prices of oil that you import falling, then I think that's good for the country.
Now we're looking at
The basket.
in general, prices in South Africa going down. You come and buy this today, you find today is this price. You go tomorrow, you find the price is gone lower.
Maybe they're falling because of the strength of the rand. Then it's good.
Can it also be like in a good season for like, let's say agricultural purposes that the price can decrease because we had maybe had a good season for fruit in the country and we've got an excess.
So it's okay when it's seasonal like that,
demand
but not permanent.
I wouldn't say permanently.
Why not? That would be nice. Hey,
That would be nice.
that would be
But
nice.
the-
As long as obviously the value of the money is.
The big question would be what the costs.
But you know, there are countries that have experienced that.
No, even here. Even here, South Africa.
Uh,
You know, like I can give you an example of, you know, there is places where, I don't know, Somalians or Pakistanians are selling bread cheaper than locals. And that's creating problem for them. But when you look at it, I don't see anything wrong.
But you see that one.
Yeah.
That one now, it becomes now a business strategy sometimes whereby you want to undercut your prices so that you force your competitors to close shop, and then you monopolize the market. Or you could be taking advantage of economies of scale, as you're saying, bulk buying, right? But that is within, I wouldn't want to call that,
That's micro, isn't it?
yes,
The
yes,
smaller,
yes,
not
yes,
the actual
yes, that will fall under micro.
not
But
macro.
on a macro scale, we're talking about throughout South
Yeah.
Africa. You know, throughout South Africa, the general trend of all prices coming down. You are right in terms of micro, yes, that will be applicable. Yeah, that will be applicable. And when you analyze that, yes, you might find that happening because of economies of scale, you know, pricing strategies, penetration strategy, you know, yeah. But on a macro level now, it becomes a totally, yeah, because you are talking about generally all the prices coming down.
That can be, yes, it can be right.
You can't say that. You must ask the opinion of the population. They will tell you. They will vote for you.
And the danger with that is
but
that
doesn't sound right.
If you ask
I
people,
mean,
can you vote?
But it's
Who
also how
SMS,
informed
yes or
are you
no?
about the reasons why the price continue to
go down.
to go down. If you are not informed and you base your answer just on the comfort that you get within that period of time, then you would say yes, it's good for the prices to go down. But maybe what we should try and think about is that what would then be the causes of the prices continuing to go down. Because then that informs us to be able to answer the question. I'm trying to think.
I think in the US at some stage they had shops that were closing down. Now, but it was happening in a very sort of consistent manner, but for a certain time of period. That this shop would close, but before it closes, it would sell the goods so cheap that they're trying to cover their cost, and then another shop would follow, and so on and so on. But I'm not sure if what you're talking about could be an example, if I'm making a good example.
yeah,
Yeah, because it can also, I'm also thinking,
it could,
the decrease
at
in
the
prices
micro
can
level.
also not be so much of a good thing.
You see, one of the points that you mentioned earlier about what economics should answer to, there is a equitism something there.
yeah, yes.
So for me, this is what.
The point I just wanted to make was if there's also sort of inflation, prices will also go down because the consumer is going to stop, especially if we're going through a recession, the consumers are going to actually start cutting down on certain luxuries.
Yeah.
And for example, I'm just going to use the golf industry where they just stop, I'm going to stop cutting down playing golf, I'm going to stop spending money on clubs, new stuff like that. So you start cutting down on your luxuries, whereas those industries start feeling it now because now they don't have that expenditure that they're normally getting, so now they're going to start dropping their prices. So it's not always, I don't think it's not always a good thing for the actual economy.
Yeah, it's not.
If it's decreasing all the time.
It's not. It has happened in Japan in the 90s, and it was a big problem for Japan. How do you address that? Because the problem with that is people will hold on. Remember, the economy is driven by expenditure by consumers. Now people will hold on to their purchases. No, let me wait. Next week the price will be lower than this. Then what happens next week? They wait again. No, the price. Definitely next month it will be lower than this. Then they wait. Now what happens to you? You have already produced your stock and it's sitting there. What do you do? Okay, let me offer discount so that maybe they can clear this up. You offer discount. So does he. And what does he do? Ah, it's actually lower this week than last week. I'll wait. Next month it will even be cheaper.
I think, what does it say, June, July of this year, we had very high consumer expenditure in the country. That wasn't forecasted at all, they didn't expect it to happen. And now actually I was listening to the radio this morning and actually we were actually at the lowest it's ever been in 10 years this past month.
This past month.
So the consumers aren't really spending at this moment now.
Because 16% of South Africans are blacklisted.
That's the truth, though.
They are blacklisted.
So what you probably see now is that more sales were going to start again round about towards November.
Towards November, yeah.
November, December.
Oh, really?
Well, that's
Will
just-
it?
In October.
Will it?
Well, they have to get the
Yeah,
consumers to
they
spend.
will start.
But
from-
I don't think people are going to spend.
They will start. But now that shows the pressures that the economy is in, you know. To recover from a recession really takes some time, you know. It really takes some time. Even if you are talking about a 2009 recession, you find economic growth is still very low.
Yeah.
Still very,
I
very
think
low.
people are still unemployed.
Yeah.
Those people who are retrenched, I think the effects are still lingering on.
Yeah. And the central bank is the one charged with inflation fighting. You know, in economics, inflation is declared as public enemy number one. You know, it's public enemy number one. So if inflation goes up, what does the Reserve Bank do? What does Jill Marcus do? What is she supposed to do? Or what can she do?
Reduce interest rates.
When inflation is
That-
high?
When inflation high, isn't it when interest rates are high?
Sorry? Remember, what did we say?
Trying to make a linkage.
You have to balance it out. So if
Make
one
a
is
link
high,
between from that loose definition of too much money, too few goods. Right, too much money. So we said
If inflation goes up,
if inflation is going up, then there's too much money. So you need to reduce this too much money. So how do you reduce this too much money from people?
you increase the interest rates.
You increase the interest rate.
Reduce that to sort of take the too much money, that excess.
Okay. So you increase the interest rates, and then what happens to your disposable income?
Comes less.
Okay. Your bond payments, repayment,
They
That's
go up.
right.
they go up.
Yeah.
So you have less to spend. So your demand also comes down. Okay. But now, inflation increased from 6.3 to 6.4. And what did Jill Marcus do? She left the interest rate at 5%.
Just a quick question.
So the question is, why didn't she increase the? Why
Yes.
did she increase the?
Why
interest
didn't she
rate?
increase the interest rate?
Because inflation grew from
6.3 to
6.4.
6.4.
Which means South Africa is importing, is doing more import than export.
Isn't it
Not
maybe there's
necessarily.
still not too much money?
You're saying, isn't it
I'm
because?
going back to that too much money and chasing too
Too
few goods.
Mhm. Okay. The explanation now is gone way beyond that. To say, remember when I gave you that GDP equation and said it's consumption expenditure plus investment plus G plus X minus M, right? Now, if you increase interest rates, you reduce demand.
If you increase the interest rates,
You increase the interest rate, you reduce, as you're saying, you reduce the disposable income, and demand will go down, then GDP would come down. Now, if GDP comes down in the country, then we are producing less than what we're producing. So we'll need less people in employment than before. So she's being constrained by unemployment.
Oh, that's right.
You see.
That makes
Because
sense.
already unemployment is 25%. So if she increases interest rate, unemployment will go over 25%. And remember, well, she's not a politician, but next year the elections.
That makes sense.
So you wouldn't want high unemployment. Okay. So what are we saying briefly? We are saying this. You increase interest rates, you reduce disposable income. When you reduce disposable income, you will reduce
GDP.
you reduce GDP. And when GDP comes down, unemployment will increase. So this is constraining Jill Marcus from doing this. Okay. Should we increase interest rates, but unemployment is already high.
But I don't really see the interest rates going up anytime soon. I don't
Sorry.
know. What do you think?
Now that's the problem, because you are looking at GDP growth. It's still, the percentages are still very, South Africa hasn't really pulled out of the recession. So if you increase interest rate and GDP starts coming down, then you'll be back in recession and you will have more problems. Than
It's bad for the elections.
he's saying it's bad for the election. Yeah. So it becomes a constraining factor here to say, okay, so what's the best? The best is, let's sit by the fence and try and focus what will happen to inflation. Because already it's way above the target. The target is 6%. It's above. So the normal thing to do would just be to say, let's increase the interest rates. But the problem now is GDP is still shaky, unemployment is very high.
Sorry, Bruce,
So
can
it's
you try and
constraining.
explain the, I've heard when they say, when inflation is a little bit high and you still leave your interest rates down, that affects the rent. I don't know if I'm making sense.
You're saying
Um,
if your interest rate is still what?
If
Come
your
again.
interest, if your inflation is going up
Inflation is going up.
and you keep your interest rates down,
Mm-hmm.
like you say, the target is 6%,
Is 6%, 3 to 6%.
You've got 6.4, and you still
Yeah.
keep your interest rates down.
Yes,
Does that have any bearing on your rent, on the strength of the rent?
on the strength
I mean-
of the rent.
Maybe it might not be as simplistic as that, but I'm just trying to understand, is there any linkage to the strength of the rent in terms of that?
Would like to try that. What did we see in our secular flow? Basically, everything is related to
Money,
yeah. There is a link with everything that takes us, that gets us linked. Okay. There is a link between your rent value and your interest rates. In the short term, what will attract people to invest their money into South Africa from outside South Africa is the returns that they can get, right?
Yes.
So if they can get a higher return on their investment in South Africa than outside, then they'll bring their money to South Africa. So if they can get a higher return in terms of interest, then they'll bring their money into South Africa. But the problem with this is that if inflation is going up and interest rates are actually going down, the real return gets eroded. You see, there is no incentive now to bring your money here, because if I'm going to bring my money into South Africa and you give me an interest rate of 3%, whilst inflation is 6.4, what is happening? I'm actually losing 3.4 there. You see that? So what is happening to people who've got their money? They will take it out if inflation is high and look for
somewhere else.
And look for other investment opportunities. Now, as they take out their money, what does it do? There you are. You've invested $100 million US dollars. You take it out. He takes it out. He takes it out. The demand for US dollars goes up. The supply doesn't respond. The rand depreciates. Then the rand hits 11 to the dollar. The rand hits 11 to the dollar. Petrol, fuel goes up. Then more problems again. You know, which reminds me of the case of Verimac. The rand recently went over 10 rand, and you know the rand went over 10 to the US dollar recently, right? Remember, and the Verimac was saying, remember they sell these imported gadgets in South Africa, and they were saying that their sales went down by 70%. You know, their turnover collapsed because of that effect. You know, because what happens to their products if the rand depreciates?
Prices go up.
Their prices go up. Now, if their prices go up, what happens to the consumer? It no longer becomes a necessity to buy this electric mop or whatever. This,
It's becoming too expensive.
It's becoming too expensive. You know, consumers then tighten their belts. Yeah. So, Verimac is very much exposed to the exchange rate. You know, and as a business, if you're exposed in that way.
I think even airlines, because they buy their fuel in dollars.
Yeah.
So when the rand doesn't do well, then they pretty much have to sort of cough up.
Which is a good thing. What happens when the rand suddenly hits above 10? Do airlines increase their tickets? Who takes the knock?
The
Consumers.
Do you increase is the price increased?
Does the tickets go up?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it
But
depends
the
also
food
on the
is-
season. It depends also on competition.
Competition.
It depends on, I think it's quite a few.
But there
other
must be some leverage somewhere
Yeah.
along the way to take care of,
They don't increase
or they might.
immediately.
Mm.
You know, because remember, more people buy tickets in advance.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
you've got fewer people that will buy like
Okay.
immediately. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think they increase it immediately, but that's factored into future pricing somehow, because at that particular time you're making a loss. You know, you've already
Okay.
sold tickets today, but the fuel
Okay.
that you're buying now,
Okay.
you're buying it at the higher price than you had predicted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you factor that into what? Into the high price of the festive season.
Yeah,
That's it.
you gotta make up for it somewhere.
But isn't that robbing us, in the festive season?
When the demand is high, that puts the price, because everybody's traveling in December. So
I see you're
it's demand
becoming
and supply.
a good economic student. So it's demand and supply, it's not robbing.
Demand and supply.
It's daylight robbery, man, this guy.
Even now, I'm a buyer at my company, and even now
Yeah.
I'm trying to freeze majority of our purchases for, especially if we get buying abroad and it's a long-term delivery of, let's say, a bit drastic one, say 22 weeks. Anywhere between that, I mean, sometimes we have to actually take out forward cover
Yeah.
for that
Forward
because
cover,
because
yeah.
you know
Insurance.
the rand is so unstable. You just don't know what's it going to be, and if you don't do that, you might have, you might strike it lucky, but the chances are at the moment it's not happening. So you could have an increase of the price that you had there, 50,000 up to 50,000 rand, depending on what you're purchasing. But the thing is, majority of the time we've budgeted for that equipment, so we've only done. We've only got a set amount, so if it goes up by 50,000, you're going to get, we take a knock.
Okay. So you get into forward contracts.
So, yeah, we're actually getting to now where we're writing out contracts. Well, we've actually required in the quote, please either estimate so we can drop the budget for that piece of machinery. So either estimate and go by 10% increment. Don't give us a ballpark figure and then you're under.
So the impact is huge. So inflation then has this impact also on the exchange rate. It becomes unstable. The exchange rate loses its value, and once that happens, a lot of things are affected then. So what we're saying is it creates an unstable macroeconomic environment. You cannot plan effectively. That's what you were saying. That's your point. Erodes disposable income. An interesting point there is hoarding, because now people shift from money as a store of value, and you rather buy non-perishables. So, okay. So you find in that scenario where there is hyperinflation, then non-perishable products start disappearing from the shelves. People are shifting their store of value into something else. Distribution of income, it favors those who have borrowed. You borrow me 1,000 rand, I pay you next year, it's worth 50% less. In actual terms, you pay, in real value, goods worth 50% less. Then we've seen the problems, the social unrest, the Arab Spring started in Tunisia. Okay, started in Tunisia. What happened? A young man was unemployed, right? And he was trying to make an honest living on the streets. And a law enforcement agent was also trying to do his job, by kicking him out. So those frustrations now, when they boil up, they create unrest. I mean, I think
Is Egypt the same?
Egypt.
Isn't that when you
Pardon?
social unrest?
Egypt.
I'm not sure if it has to do with inflation.
No,
When I say social upheavals, I'm also talking
It's,
about the fact that we have this high. Everyone's got these high sort of university bills and loans that they've taken out, and when they get into those fields are occupied. There's no work for them, and that can cause a social upheaval where they decide let's just throw over the government.
Like our unemployment.
Yeah.
And
It's happening
a lot
in
of
Greece.
graduates that are going to school and
the fact
they
that
cannot find jobs.
They're draining the entire middle class. So
I think
actually
we are even going far, Service delivery in South Africa.
terrible.
Service delivery in South Africa. What is happening? It's the twin evils of in an economy, it's unemployment and inflation. What is happening to those youths spearheading the service delivery protest? They are unemployed.
But don't you think that
Frustrated.
if
So the last word
If-
means what?
Sorry?
Strike or toy, the last word.
Yeah.
Vivos.
Viva.
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 No, if you look at the audits of
Mhm.
Terence, of the
Auditor
Terence,
General.
Auditor General,
Yeah.
there's a lot of what's the word? They use a certain word of
Fruitless.
yeah, fruitless,
expenditure.
spending, and those findings.
Okay.
I think it was over R1 billion that he said that was
Mhm.
spent. I'm just thinking now that though we said that the effects of inflation could be also unemployment, which will cause social upheavals, But initially, when we were saying those categories that we said the players in the economy, the government was one of them, that if the government, even at that level, at municipal level, if they could do their job well, somehow that fits into the system,
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
things better, so that even when the unemployment rate is high, but if service delivery is
Yeah.
it's far much better, then you reduce, maybe you can be able to deal with some of those effects on inflation, somehow indirectly.
Yeah, that is true. And also, the other point that he raised before we went to lunch about the mentality that we have,
Mm.
there is a mentality within South Africa that the government owes me.
Entitlement.
I'm entitled to a house. I'm a South African, I'm entitled to a house, I'm entitled to free electricity.
So I said you must get rid of all the squatter camps.
Now, let's look at a comparison of some indicators of South Africa with other countries. How is South Africa performing? Look at the unemployment rate.
US 350 million, 7.3%.
So what would you say is the performance of South Africa in comparison with the other countries? What can you say, Marianne? Let's hear your interpretation of those figures. What do they say about South Africa?
Is that China 4.10
The unemployment rate.
unemployment?
And remember, China has got a population of 1.3 billion people. China has got a population of 1.3 billion.
And we have a population of what, 50?
So look at
Scary, eh?
unemployment is a big challenge. Look at Japan, the one I was talking about, that it battled with falling prices for a very long period. Look at the interest rate
0.
from their central bank. Is that good? Is that bad?
Now,
Isn't it good?
I have a question here.
Yes.
I see something a little bit, I don't know if it's a discrepancy or so, for Japan, it's
Mhm.
3.8,
Yes. Unemployment.
yes, and which is very low compared to USA.
Mhm.
But in terms of GDP, yes, USA is the first one with 15 point something billion.
It's the size. Doesn't the size of
Now, the size of USA's GDP is 15 trillion US dollars. Right. Now, that's where now we are saying, for us to get a better indicator of economic welfare, we divide the GDP by the population. And then we get GDP per capita.
Okay.
So that then gives us an indication of the standards of living within that country, that, okay, roughly each person has about 7,000 yearly income. You know, remember we say GDP can be measured also by adding the total incomes within the country. Okay. And I gave you an example of Somalia without a central government. What do you think the GDP is? Well, they've recently, there is a government now through the UN that is always protected by an African force, you know. But still, the militias are still there fighting that government. So when we write GDP, we'll just put a 1. It's just 1.
For Somalia.
Yeah. That's what happens now if you don't have, you know,
So
the infrastructure is non-existent.
This indicator is for this year.
This year.
This states.
Now, what happens now? If you were in Somalia, then what would you do? There is no government, there is militias, people are fighting.
You
What do
go
you
to
do?
another country, or you go to where there's stability, where there's more sort of law and order.
Okay.
But then not everyone can, it's not practical that everyone
Not
will get out
everyone.
of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those that
So,
leave,
Okay.
obviously there's an impact on activity, on economic activity in that country.
Okay.
you get rid of al-Bashir.
But then when they come to South Africa again, it's a problem, eh?
Yes.
You see now,
Yeah, so these things are linked.
which is what we're talking about in terms of, we talked about the tuck shops, the price is coming down.
Mm.
Is that right? You know, and then it creates conflicts now. You know, it creates conflicts. Then you see the shops being banned,
People being killed.
people being killed.
But why? I'm just looking at Zimbabwe. The unemployment rate is.
10.
These statistics, how recent are they? Because Zimbabwe is 10.7, which is lower than South Africa, and that doesn't make sense to me.
The population
Well, the population is small, eh?
It's small,
Look at the
30 million.
population, 30.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
There's
yeah.
like one thing, one
Well-
Yeah, sorry guys, I missed
people are
the
unemployed.
population.
The population is about the population of KwaZulu-Natal.
No, I've got my answer.
And now, remember, within 2008, 2009, within those problems, what happened to the population?
Yes, it's true.
Most of them
Yeah.
left.
Right. And then afterwards, the population then starts picking up.
Uh,
And the way unemployment is measured, you see, the other thing is the way unemployment is measured. How is it measured? You're saying the number of people who are unemployed and actively seeking a job divided by the labor force. So if you are unemployed and you have given up looking for a job,
You're not counted.
you are not counted, even though you are unemployed. I've been looking for a job for the past 2 years. I have given up. This thing will never come right. You are no longer part of the unemployment rate, even though you are not working. So what happens if we include that figure here?
It's going to go up.
Terrible.
And how many have given up?
It will go
A
up
lot,
to
eh? A lot of
Mhm.
people.
Another half.
It can go up to even 35%.
35%. Easy.
I mean, I know just as an individual, I know at least a minimum of 10 people that, you know, I just say, I've given up. Even though they're not, some people don't say it,
Don't say it,
verbally
yeah.
to you, but
Yeah.
you see the attitude,
The actions,
everything.
yes, yes. Now, if we all know 10 people that have given up, you know, it looks like that figure is very conservative. You know.
It's to make the
Zuma.
Zuma win the elections.
This is how we are measuring it, you know. So what it says again is about our figures, about statistics, you know. It's about statistics. As somebody said, if you torture data for a very long time, what will it do? It will confess. You know. So if you torture the data for a long time, it will confess and give you the picture that you want. You know. But that's how, in general, that's how unemployment will be measured in across those countries. So as you can see, Japan is really backlit with deflation. You know. So their idea of keeping interest rates at zero is to try and stimulate demand. Say, okay, if the interest rate is, the benchmark rate is zero, then people might find an incentive now. They might have more disposable income. They might spend. You know. Remember, it used to be the second largest economy in the world
Yes.
before China overtook them. And, you know, there are some estimates that say Nigeria could have been the largest economy in Africa if it wasn't for corruption. You know.
So I see on that those indicators there, Zimbabwe compared to Nigeria, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
the rate of inflation there for Nigeria is 8.2
Yes.
compared to Zimbabwe 1.2.
Yeah. Now remember, the last time we saw somebody with lots of money, right? There was a total erosion of confidence within the economy at that particular point. You know, just about everyone had lost confidence in the system, in the money, in just about everything. So what happened? What happened afterwards? There was the unity government by Thabo Mbeki, and then from there they dollarized.
Yes.
So they used the US dollar, right? Because no one now could trade in that old currency. So they shifted to the US dollar, and the US dollar now brought in confidence into the system, you know, which is what we say, that the moment people lose confidence in the system, it's gone. It is like banks. Banks do not keep all our money, right? They lend it out. If we all do go and withdraw our money, they will collapse. But what keeps the system there? The confidence in the system.
Like, I think there was that bank, it was in Sambo. There was a bank that collapsed, same thing, about over 10 years ago in South Africa. Sambo. I think it was a similar thing that most people, the guys who had huge investments, all went and took out their money.
And that's the problem now with Japan, that people would find it easier to invest in US government stock than in Japanese banks. You know. So the moment people lose confidence in the system, and remember now, that money that you use that you deposit into the bank, that you use as savings, is the same money that is being lent out as loans. So if there are no savings, you have deprived the economy of a lending base. You see, you have deprived the economy of a lending base.
Is that why they say that in South Africa? Because I know there's a huge thing about South Africans not saving,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to be relevant, and that that we are mostly indebted. That South Africans are indebted, they don't save. And as a result, they are also trying to inspire, or they even started the South African Saving Institute, just to be able to do that work of inspiring South Africans to save more money. Would that be the reason that by having more South Africans not spending and saving, we're actually making the economy better and aiding the inflation rate?
It's a tough one. Anyone wants to comment on that? Well, it does, in the sense that when you save, you are creating a lending base. You are creating a fund for investment, and when people have access to investment funds, then they are able to invest them productively and grow the economy. So it helps in inflation fighting, in that if I take you back to that loose definition and say too much money, too few goods, right? So we have looked at the too much money part, reduce money supply. Now the too few goods, what does it say? Increase the supply of goods. So if you can increase the productive capacity and produce more goods, then you'll be able to match your supply and demand. So that's another part now where you find, as a general discussion, where people say African economies have tended to focus more on demand side rather than on supply side strategies, because supply side strategies increase your productive capacity, then you produce more goods. Okay. You produce more goods. Okay. You produce more goods. Shall we take a break there, and then when we come back, we look at monetary policy.